are, how shall I put this, lingering hopes amongst holidaymakers and travel operators as the government prepares later today to update the green list of countries that we can visit without quarantine.
However, also reading in the papers this morning that a new variant, possibly from Nepal, has been detected, and this could prove detrimental to any progress in the travel industry. Well, we're joined now by the Safeguarding Minister Victoria Atkins. Good morning to you. So we're waiting to hear the details later on for which countries will be moving around, whether they'll be on the green list or not. But there's a lot of frustration from people who are trying to book holidays, who may be abroad at the moment, that there just isn't enough clarity on this as to where they're safe to book holidays to.
Well, good morning. And look, I understand their frustrations, but as has sadly been the case throughout this pandemic, we've had to assess the data, collect the data and assess it very carefully to try to plan what will happen if we make a change and what the impacts will be here at home. And so I know it's frustrating for travellers, but I'm afraid this summer is going to be a little bit like last summer in that we're not going to be quite as free and easy in terms of our travel as perhaps we were used to before the pandemic. But the list system will be announced a little later today, and until then, obviously, I can't help with which countries may be on which list.
Well, it is being suggested very strongly that Portugal is going to go from green to amber. Can you comment on that at all?
I simply can't. I'm afraid that the Secretary of State will make the announcements later today, and I wouldn't wish to add to the.
How much notice would people have, though, if that were to happen, for example? Because the Prime Minister had said he wouldn't hesitate to make changes, and yet for those people who've planned that they wouldn't have to quarantine, they may be abroad at the moment, that would obviously be a huge upheaval if it's brought in at short notice.
Indeed, and again, I'm afraid I simply can't speculate at this point. That these decisions are made for the right reasons. You know, we know that this virus mutates. We have one of the best, if not the best, genomic sequencing programs in the world. We are the country that spots these variants early. But with that knowledge, with that data, we have to shape policies accordingly.
Well, I think most people would accept that that is reasonable, that it's reasonable that the traffic light system should mutate and change along with the virus, basically, to adjust to existing circumstances and changing circumstances. So we accept that you can't comment on specific countries, that's fine. So let me ask you a much broader question. What is the point of the traffic light system if we're told that certain countries are definitely on the green list, and in the same breath, the minister who's announced that or is talking about that says, but we'd rather you didn't go anyway? Stay at home, have a staycation, don't go to a green listed country. What's the point of having a green light if you can't go through it?
Well, we've been clear throughout that, again, with international travel, we have to be very careful. You know, if you're booking your holiday, please make sure that you're able to cancel it at short notice or you're covered.
No, you're not answering the question. I'm sorry to say that, but you're not. I'm asking, what's the point of having a green light if you're told simultaneously that you should actually keep the handbrake on and not go through it? Why not put everything on amber?
But because we very much want, as indeed I believe the whole world wants, we want to try to return to normality, but we've got to do so in a way that is cautious and responsible. And that's why the Prime Minister has set out the roadmap of easing restrictions up to the 21st of June domestically.
Yes, but why you're not dealing with the simple question. It's really straightforward. Why have a green light system if you're told simultaneously that you really shouldn't go through that green light? Why not simply call everything amber or red?
Because, again, we want people to be able to use their common sense with the warning, though, that things may change. I mean, you know, the virus we know mutates like every other virus, and we have to react to that when these new variants are identified. But in terms of the green, amber and red list, you know, I hope it has brought clarity, particularly with those countries that we're most concerned about in terms of the pandemic, the red list countries, really bringing that clarity that people must not travel there.
I don't think that's clarity at all. I think that answer exemplifies what people are finding so frustrating about this. You're saying, on the one hand, that the government wants to return to normality and you want people to go abroad and enjoy holidays, and in the same breath, you're saying you don't want them to. It's a complete conflict of statements. Can you not see that?
forgive me, I've not said that we don't. So to try to help you, we have the green, amber and red list. Red list we must not travel to. Amber list we only travel to if there are very, very extenuating circumstances, a dying relative, for example. And then the green list that if you travel there, when the country's on the green list, then the quarantine restrictions will not apply in the way that they do for amber and red list, because, of course, this is all part of the package of measures for travel, that with each country, it's not just about whether travel is permitted, but it's also the regime of quarantine that attaches to that category of countries.
But you'd still rather we didn't go...
We have always said that, this list is liable to change, and that will depend on the evidence that emerges about new variants. If one is frustrated, it's because, unfortunately, this virus
of course.
Is not predictable. We know this after a year of living with this.
But to be clear, despite everything you've said about the lack of restrictions on green-listed countries, you would still, as a government, prefer us not to go to a green-listed country, full stop.
No, that's not what I've said. What I've said is that travellers have to be clear-sighted, open-eyed about the possibility that countries may be moved on or off the green list. We've been, I think, pretty clear about that. And so that's why we've said all along, please, if you're travelling to a green list country, make sure that you've got arrangements in place with the travel agent and so on to so that if there are cancellations, whatever, that you're covered and you're protected. But we are very much, this is part of our work, looking at all the data across all the factors that play such an important part of this. We're looking at this as part of the roadmap to try to return to normality. I know it's frustrating. We've lived this for a year now, but we've got to please just keep going with both the travel arrangements, but also the roadmap to try to really squash this pandemic.
Well, and everyone is counting down to June the 21st to see, hoping that the restrictions will be lifted then. When you look, we've got the front page of the Daily Mail today talking about the Nepal variant, threat to our holidays, and also when you look ahead to how things will be lifting come June the 21st, do you foresee that we'll be able to scrap all restrictions? Do you think that we'd still have to wear masks, that we'll still have to have a level of social distancing because of the threat of new variants?
Well, with the roadmap, we've said that we will make announcements on the 14th of June. If you remember, the roadmap's been very, very carefully calculated to allow enough time between each stage for us to look at the data, see if there have been any changes in, for example, hospitalisations or new variants, how the vaccine programme is working to protect us all, and so on. And so the next set of announcements will be made on the 14th of June. But the single thing that we can all do to help move us forward on the roadmap is to make sure that we get the vaccination. So when you get the call, please have the jab, because that is how we protect ourselves against these new variants that are emerging. We know that nearly half the population have now had both jabs, which is great news. But we need, please, adults to have the jab, both first and second doses, when they get the call, because that's how we can ease out of these restrictions.
All right, let's move it on. What's the government's education policy looking like this morning? You've had the resignation yesterday of Sir Kevin Collins, the czar that was appointed by Boris Johnson to handle many aspects of education. He asked for a lot of money. He's got a tenth of it, and he's walked off in disgust. Where are you this morning on that? How are things looking?
Well, we're really grateful to Sir Kevin for his work. This has been a terrible year for us all, but young people and children have paid a particular price, both in terms of missing out on schooling, but also, of course, all the developmental and social changes that happen in our younger years. And so as part of our programme to help particularly the most disadvantaged children to catch up, we announced last year a further £1.7 billion worth of funding.
We know what happened last year. Let's talk about what's happened in the last 24 hours. That's what I'm asking you. So Kevin Collins has walked off in disgust. He was offered 10% of what he thought was necessary for the catch-up to take place. Do you understand his resignation? Do you agree with his resignation? Do you think that more should have been offered?
So the funding last year is important because, as I say, it's part of a rolling programme of help for children. So last year we invested in one-to-one tuition.
Sorry, can we talk about... look, I don't want to... I really don't want to be abrupt and interrupt you, but I don't want to talk about last year. We're talking about what's happened in the last 24 hours. That's what I'm asking you. What do you think about Sir Kevin Collins's resignation? What's your view on that? Please answer that question and don't tell me what happened last year, please.
The reason, if you'll just allow me to develop, the reason that the funding last year is significant is because we know from that evidence base that one-on-one tuition can make huge, huge changes in a child's education. So effective tuition can add between 3 and 5 months of attainment in a child's education. That's why this week we've announced £1.4 billion worth, and £1 billion of that money is being invested in extra...
Going to be enough, though, is it? He's asked for 10 times this money, and this money isn't going to actually help children. When you look at the cost per child, there are varying reports. He says it's £22 per child. That actually, how much of a difference is that going to make? That's not going to give them the tuition to be able to make up for the lost time. The front page of the Mirror today, you've let down children again. And I think for that generation of children who lost so many days of their schooling, there are so many that are desperately trying to catch up. Unless this is tackled now, this is going to be a blighted generation, isn't it?
Well, this is why the focus on the work that we know works. So the evidence base is that one-on-one tuition can make a huge difference to the most disadvantaged and the children who are most left behind. But we're also investing in helping teachers. Teachers have had a tough year as well. We're wanting to help them with this money through development and training and so on. But this is part of a programme of work. We know, for example, that Sir Kevin has focused on extending the school day. We are very much looking into that. There is a review going on at the moment, but we need to bring teachers and parents with us on this journey if it is to work.
Minister,
so this money week is really important, really significant, but it is not the end of the story, as the Prime Minister has made clear.
Of course it's not. It's an element in the story. But, Minister, listen, a no comment is a perfectly good answer to this question. What is your view as a government minister about Sir Kevin Collins's resignation yesterday?
I have the privilege and pleasure of working with Sir Kevin through his chairmanship of the Youth Endowment Fund, which is a huge fund that we have to invest in intervention programmes for children who are most at risk of serious violence. So I very much enjoy working with Sir Kevin. Of course, I'm sorry that he has decided to step down, but I promise you his work and the focus that he brought and the focus that we all have on helping the most disadvantaged children and helping children to catch up more generally.
It just seems like he's not the only time, is it, that we've seen an advisor come in, been asked to give advice, and then they've left because that advice hasn't been listened to.
Well, I mean, you're testing me now. I can't think off the top of my head, but what I do know is that we've taken on board very carefully what Sir Kevin has recommended. As I say, the particular work he set out in relation to extending the school day, there is a review going into that. We have not closed our minds to that, but we've got to bring people with us. We've got to explain to teachers and to parents why a particular course of action is necessary and be very conscious that...
OK, you've made that part of the argument very clear. Thank you very much indeed for your time.